This week on The Record, Missouri Republicans shut down debate in the Senate and ram an attempt to revive an abortion ban through to the voters.
It's really disappointing.
Plus, the GOP sends a bill to Governor Mike Kehoe's desk asking him to strip voters of the paid leave and minimum wage hikes they approved in November. How will he respond?
I'm a big fan of removing government.
Running for Senate, which Democrat in D.C. lays claim to Dick Durbin's mantle as a downstate Democrat? Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy is on the record. And the great trade debate. 2 weeks after delivering a speech lamenting lost jobs on the floor of the Senate, U.S. Senator Eric Schmitt is on the record looking forward to the future of the American and global economies. It's all coming up right now. Welcome to The Record. I'm Mark Maxwell. From the well of the world's most deliberative body, Missouri Senator Eric Schmitt offered a stark warning about America's declining economic might. He painted a bleak picture of shuttered factories, jobs shipped overseas, and a nation betrayed, in his words, by free trade.
Everything that mattered happened here. But over the last few decades, the people in power squandered that inheritance. They shipped the good-paying, middle-class American jobs that once were the backbone of our economy to places like Mexico and China, transforming once prosperous towns and cities into hollow shells of their former selves, often defined by addiction and death.
But how exactly would Senator Schmitt seek to hit reset on those trade policies, and what might those changes mean for Missouri workers? And how do Republicans plan to keep up with rival countries in a fast-changing global economy? Senator Eric Schmitt is now on the record. Hi, Senator. I listened with great interest to your speech on the Senate floor about this great trade debate. You spoke with a lot of nostalgia about the last 30 years. You said you wanted to speak about the past. Before I start asking you about the future, I do want to ask and explore one of the premises of your speech there. You focused on the last 30 years, but trade barriers really started falling long before NAFTA. And American jobs, American wages, American wealth set record highs. We built the greatest economy, the wealthiest economy the world has ever seen in that time. So was it really trade that hurt workers, or is it how we structured the gains?
Well, I think the way I look at it from a historical context is after World War II, we had a trade policy and a foreign policy that was predicated on the idea of defeating Soviet communism. So we allowed our allies in Europe and Japan to sort of build themselves up. That meant the umbrella of defense that effectively we paid for. It also meant trade deals that were patently unfair to us, but we were willing to live with that while they, again, were rebuilt. The challenge came after the Cold War ended. When the Berlin Wall came down, we never really revisited these issues. So if you notice, I've talked a lot about, on the foreign policy front, a new American realism, where our European allies step up in a much more meaningful way. We focus on the homeland and the real threat, which is China. And then also from a trade policy perspective, we've never really done much to address those inequities that exist. And they're not just tariffs, they're also trade barriers that exist in other countries that keep our products, our commodities out of their markets because they're trying to protect their own industries. And take beef, for example, in Australia. So now is the time to address this. And so I think what you're seeing with President Trump is hitting a reset button to have a negotiation about that. And I think the net of all that, Mark, will be more access to more markets and a more fair trade than we've seen in a very, very long time.
I'm really interested in this particular debate because part of your job will be shaping the economy of the 2030s and the 2040s. We know automation is on the horizon, robotics, all those advanced machineries. So with that in mind, should Republicans support profit sharing or tax reforms that would actually tie workers' incomes to these record corporate gains and all this automation we're going to see in the next few decades?
Well, I do think, number one, you've seen jobs shipped overseas, and that's primarily because the incentive structure existed for them to go do it with cheaper labor. And I do think we need to figure out ways to bring that manufacturing back. And so we're not just talking about it, we're proposing real things to go do. I think it's important to point out, this is why as you know, I was at NGA West, and we're talking about St. Louis being the defense tech capital of the United States. Those are good paying jobs and something we can be great at. It's why I fought so hard and worked with President Trump to deliver the F-47, which will be made in St. Louis, over 5,000 jobs, hundreds of billions of dollars worth of investment. We're not done yet. Next week, we're going to be proposing something called the Defense Tech Hub Act, which would sort of decentralize where a lot of this innovation happens. It wouldn't just be in the Washington, D.C. area, but spread across the country with the idea that St. Louis can be a hub for that kind of innovation. There's a lot of good things happening there. And then also from a workforce perspective, working with Senator Gary Peters, a Democrat from Michigan, who's dealing with some of these same issues with deindustrialization, to have a trained workforce with the curriculum being aligned with the jobs of the future. So there's a lot to do, and I'm excited to do it. I grew up in the shadow of the airport, as you know. I grew up in Bridgeton. I grew up in a working class household, and I want to see those jobs come back. They're not going to look exactly like they were in the 1970s, but advanced manufacturing can do a lot to lift the tide of working folks who really honestly have felt like they've been left behind.
Just a quick aside, and I'll get back to this trade question. We talk about the airports and Boeing and all these jets. Should the president accept this foreign gift, $400 million palace in the sky?
I mean, it's a free plane. I honestly, I feel like this is a lot of Washington, even though you're asking me from St. Louis, a lot of like what we get caught up every day. It's a free plane. And I trust them to negotiate the best deal possible. There'll have to be obviously some retrofitting and security that takes place, but you know, sadly, there have been delays for Air Force One, and I don't, you know, I think that I trust them to sort of handle this the way they're handling it.
Senator, thanks for your time.
All right, Mark.
For the record, Senator Tammy Duckworth called that plane a bribe. We have much more of our conversation with Senator Eric Schmitt up on KSDK.com, and tune into the 5 Plus app tomorrow night for an expanded version of this episode. We're back in a moment. This week, the Missouri House and Senate gavelled out, heading for the exits on the start of summer break, ending an intense session. Heated debates over abortion access and worker benefits brought the chambers to an abrupt halt and a divisive close. Senate Republicans passed a measure asking voters to repeal abortion access they just approved in November. Then the Senate also took direct action to take away the paid sick leave benefits and minimum wage hikes voters also approved in November. The partisan power play drawing fierce backlash and protests from Democrats who tried and failed to block the supermajority from imposing its will.
I cannot believe that we're going backwards. We are going backwards as it relates to women's options for health care, and it's unacceptable. And we will ultimately secure the right of women to make their own health care decisions.
They have no reason. There's 10 senators, yes, disrespect. They disrespect the voters. They don't care. They don't care. We've heard time and time again on the floor that the Republicans say that the voters didn't know what they were voting for. We've heard them say that time and time again. They didn't know what they were voting for. That is not the case. Everybody I talked to knew what they voted for. I guess what I would have to say to voters is you know, they want these issues, and then they never make the politicians pay that take them away from them. And until that happens, nothing's going to change.
Republican and Baptist pastor Brian Seitz led the charge in the House. He suggested maybe voters weren't fully informed when they threw out the state's abortion ban.
I think the important thing is that we're putting something on the ballot that would quantify and qualify the will of the voters. We want to send this to the voters so that they can make an informed decision.
This time, the question on your ballot will look different. Republicans moderated a bit from their first total ban to now allow for rare exceptions of rape and incest. Those abortions, though, would only be allowed during the first 12 weeks of a pregnancy. The new abortion question could go to voters in 2026, something Governor Mike Kehoe says he would support. He also hinted he would strip workers paid leave benefits and minimum wage hikes, directly rejecting the will of the voters. Mayor Kara Spencer reacted to the Republican power plays at a Thursday press conference.
Look, Missouri voters were very clear. We voted for this. I think it's not only an issue of human rights. I know it's an issue of economic vitality for the state of Missouri. When folks are looking, young talent looking to move somewhere, take a job, consider going to higher education, these issues are important to them. They signal what a state's values are, and I'm disappointed in the state legislature.
But I'm a big fan of removing government, and in this case, a left-wing group out of the East Coast telling Missouri businesses what we have to do or not have to do.
Repeal of Amendment 3 is a constitutional amendment, so it would go back to voters most likely next November 2026. If the governor signs the repeal of Prop A, workers would lose their benefits they voted for August 28 of this year. Former Missouri Governor Kit Bond and U.S. Senator Kit Bond passed away this week. He was the youngest person ever elected governor in the state at 33 years old back in 1972. He'd go on to serve 4 terms in the U.S. Senate before he retired in 2011. He was 86 years old. There will be a memorial Tuesday at the Missouri Capitol Rotunda, a celebration planned in St. Louis Thursday the 22nd at the Ladue Chapel Presbyterian Church. We're back in a moment. Illinois Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy joins us now, representing Illinois' 8th Congressional District. That's the northwest suburbs, for our viewers maybe unfamiliar. Good to have you with us.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
You represent that seat in Congress that most political analysts and pundits would consider a safe Democratic seat, yet you'd have to walk away from it to jump into this Senate race. So why risk so much to run for this Senate seat? Is there something you could do from the Senate that you feel maybe you can't do from Congress?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I think that the reason I'm jumping in is because of my story and the moment that we're in. Maybe I'll just say a little bit about my story. I was born in India, came to this country when I was 3 months old to Buffalo, New York, and things were going great until suddenly the recession of 1973 hit us very hard. And at that point, my father lost his income. But thanks to the generosity of the American people, we were allowed to move into public housing and food stamps. So I spent about half of my early childhood in those two life-sustaining programs. And then eventually my father got on his feet and then got a great job in, of all places, Peoria, Illinois. And so they loaded up the U-Haul and started driving and driving until they reached Peoria. And that's where we entered the middle class. And pretty much every night at the dinner table, my father would say, think of the greatness of this country. And whatever the two of you do, my brother and me, just make sure it's there for the next families who need it. And so that became almost my mission statement, the North Star of my personal compass, and my why, which is make sure that, the American dream, which we lived, was available to others. Now, fast forward to today, unfortunately, that dream is slipping from the grasp of millions of people, especially now with the economic chaos that people are facing in their small businesses or even in their everyday lives as they deal with Donald Trump and Elon Musk. And so, having had a career of standing up to bullies, I feel it's my duty to stand up to Donald Trump and make sure that that American dream that I and my family was able to enjoy is there for the next families who need it.
What do you make of Governor Pritzker trying to clear the field with his early endorsement? Before you and Robin Kelly even jumped into the race, there he was endorsing his lieutenant governor. Does that bother you at all? Do you welcome people like Congresswoman Lauren Underwood into a bigger, broader race here?
Well, look, I think the people of Illinois deserve a chance to have their say in who their next U.S. Senator will be. I like the other candidates, and whatever Governor Pritzker and others do is up to them. But ultimately, the endorsement that I seek is from the people of Illinois. And they're good people, and I think in their wisdom they'll make their decision known in due course.
Do you think there are real policy differences that distinguish you from the field of candidates, or will this boil down to a contest of popularity and personality?
There might be some differences. I think that overall, probably we share a lot more in common than what divides us in terms of policies. But in terms of where we come from, I'm obviously someone with deep Peoria roots. I call myself a son of downstate. I have a background of kind of standing up to whether they're corporate bullies or otherwise that I bring to the table. And then finally, I'm someone who has had a private sector background as a former small business person, but also in Congress, I've worked a lot on the issue of how do you move people up the economic ladder? And the issue that I've focused on, among others, is career technical and vocational education. I authored the law that has modernized our nation's skills-based or vocational education system for 11 million people annually getting a higher quality skills-based education. It doesn't get enough resources, however. So that's something that I would want to continue to focus on were I privileged to be in the U.S. Senate.
Last question quickly on background and experience. Can someone who has only worked in Springfield convert to working in D.C., and is there a learning curve there?
There's always a learning curve. There's a certain obscure state senator named Barack Obama who did it successfully. But on the other hand, I think that having been in the U.S. House. I've had the privilege of working on various pieces of legislation successfully, oftentimes in the minority. I hope to bring that experience and, of course, my experience standing up to bullies and people like Donald Trump to the U.S. Senate as well.
All right, Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy, I'm sure the downstate voters, Democrats in particular, would hope to see you in person down in the area soon. Perhaps we'll see you on the trail.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Thanks for your time. Several key questions stand between Democrats and a return to power, like what went wrong in 2024? What really happened to Joe Biden?
Certainly, either he needed to be the Democratic nominee as he promised he would be, or he needed to drop out before the Democratic primaries.
That's Governor J.B. Pritzker on CNN offering hindsight when what he needed was foresight. When he visited Venice, Illinois Thursday, I reminded him voters want honest leaders. I asked him about signs of Biden's cognitive decline back in 2022. Then Pritzker stood by him. The year after, I asked Pritzker if a younger generation of Democrats should challenge Joe Biden in a primary. He remained unmoved. Even after Biden's disastrous debate in 2024, Pritzker again stood by him. So I asked him if he owed voters an explanation.
I realize that reporters who are covering the wide world want to go back and relitigate what happened in 2024 and examine every little thing. And there's a book that came out that's suggesting that there was cognitive decline. We can all examine, the whatever you think someone's, cognitive capability is or was. But in the end, what you want are leaders who actually care about the people they represent, all of them, not just the people that voted for them. And you talked about truth. You think that we're living in a regime now that believes in truth? That's ludicrous.
You'll notice that accusation did not include any accountability. The Democratic Party faces more hard questions ahead. Can they win the House back? What's their message? Who leads them? Is J.B. Pritzker a real national contender?
The question is, how can I best participate in the fight? And so whether that's being governor or not, whether that's potentially in the future running for president, it's just to me about we've got to win in 2026.
Lost in all this diagnosis is a theme central to democracy itself. Pritzker, in protecting Biden, was protecting the leader of his hive. As Biden faded, Pritzker propped up the party elder at the cost of the party's future. This pattern runs deep through the whole party. We saw it in Jefferson City this week when State Representative Marlene Terry dared to vote her conscience. She broke ranks with the party's entrenched leadership and sided with her constituents over the powerful teachers' unions. Her reward was removal from committee posts by Minority Leader Ashley Awney. This wasn't about policy alone. It was about power, about control through fear. We saw the same thing on the national stage when Democrats demoted David Hogg, the 25-year-old Parkland school shooting survivor who was elected vice chair of the Democratic National Committee. Rather than welcome his perspective into the fold and the millions he inspires, party leaders this week voided his win on a technicality. Why? Maybe they fear the wrath of new voters he might bring into the party. This contagion of fear led Democratic leaders to circle the wagons in 2024 around a president whose capacity was clearly in question. They said then it was about protecting democracy, but what they clung to was their own positions, their own authority, their own place on that sinking ship. Instead of embracing debate and allowing voters to decide, they muffled dissent, castigated Congressman Dean Phillips, who stuck his neck out, and then they stuck to that script, even as the nation longed for candor and clarity. From Missouri to the DNC floor to the corridors of national power, the pattern is the same. Leaders are more eager to control their own people than to serve the public. Institutions that fear change more than they trust the people. This isn't leadership, it's just cowardice cloaked in the party banner. We see it right here on this wall, outside the St. Louis Municipal Opera House. Union General Carl Schurz put it best. He wrote, "Democratic government will be the more successful, the more the public opinion ruling it is enlightened and inspired by full and thorough discussion. The greatest danger threatening democratic institutions comes from those influences which tend to stifle or demoralize discussion." So let's remind those in power. Their job is to serve, not to silence. Because if we lose that lesson, we lose more than just an election. We may lose our democracy. That's all of our time this week. Until the same time next week, we're off the record.